Does anybody want to pray? If not, I'll pray. No? Okay. All right, let's bow our heads. Padre que estás en los cielos, gracias te damos por este día, Señor. Gracias porque nos has cuidado, Señor, aunque a veces no nos reconocemos y no te lo damos, Señor, en este día. Te damos gracias por eso. Gracias, Señor, porque nos diste otra oportunidad de reunirnos, Señor, y aprender de tu palabra, Señor, porque cada día conocemos más de ti, Señor. Ponemos este estudio bíblico en tus manos, Señor, y que podamos salir un poquito, conociéndote un poquito más de este lugar. En nombre de Cristo Jesús, amén.
So, is this on? Hello? Yeah, I guess so. It's actually really quiet though. It's Daniel's. Oh, okay, that's fine. Okay, so, all right. So last week we're actually at chapter 2, and we actually didn't finish it all the way, and so actually we're going to talk about that a little bit more. And I think Daisy kind of wanted to talk about first was just kind of like a picture that she found and
Well,
what.
Basically, I wanted to ask if anybody, because like we're reading 1 through 5, and I don't know about you guys, but I've read 1 through 3, and I haven't been able to pass 3. I've been going but I keep going back to chapter 1, and based on what we've discussed or we talk or like questions that you guys might have, I'll go do a little bit more research. Just throwing that out there. Did anybody else reread verses 1 through 3 or 1 through 5 and had a question or answer to questions that came up in the last couple weeks? Huh? One, any chapters, because right now we're focusing on 1. We're trying to finish 1 through 5. So
Right, 'cause we're still in that first part of as far as the movement, right? So we're still on that beginning portion. So usually we're supposed to be reading that 1 through 5 over and over and over again, and that's what Daisy's trying to say on that one.
Yeah.
2, 3. Okay, that's fine.
Okay, so let me. So before we go to 3, like I just want to make sure everything was covered from 1 to. Everybody's good.
Yeah.
So Edenia had brought up a question about the vault, and so I had already kind of done research before then, but I had run across a visual, and the visual that I had come across, I'm gonna share it with you guys. It kind of helps, but I'm not saying that this is like, oh, this is exactly what the ancient people like were trying to describe, but I think it's kind of like it kind of helps, I guess, understand like what they meant. And I know we were talking about last time about the coritos that we would sing, and we'd say like, why did, like, nowadays we know because of all the technology, we know that we revolve around the sun, not the sun revolving around us. But the way that they didn't have all that information back in the day, so they based it on like what they, I guess, were visually seeing, and it kind of paints a picture, kind of. I'm not saying like, again, this is like, I'm 100% saying that this is correct, but this is what they talked about. It was kind of like a dome. In English, they said it as a dome, a dome, kind of like baseball fields, just like a circular place. And so on top of that is like God and everything in the heavens, and then supposedly like this is where he put the sky, and it separated the waters from up here from the waters below. And that's why they say sometimes too, like why Noah was in Noah's time period, it flooded so fast because he opened up the gates. And some of the songs they say that too, open up the floodwater gates. Abre las puertas del cielo. And there's certain psalms. And what I'm trying to get to here is like there are certain parts in the Bible that they talk about certain things that I wasn't even aware. Like they talk about the windows and doors of heaven. So this is kind of a picture of what I guess they saw, the waters above, and then the what they visually were seeing, the sun, the stars, the clouds, and then what they always talk about, the Sheol is down, and then the great deep, which is the very, very bottom. And sometimes, like, I think even where, like, we talked about Jonah would say, like, he's in the great deep, like, very, very, like, the bottom,
Right.
chaotic.
Very, very bottom.
Yeah.
Right.
So anyway, that's just an illustration, I think. So it's not like this. So it's like the sky, the el firmamento, or like there's something that's, what was it called again? The vault. The vault is just, I think, this thing that separates what's above our regular sky. So that's kind of how I saw it too, and it kind of made sense. Mm-hmm. The vault of the sky, that's what I'm saying. Like I think it's like the sky and then the vault. Yeah, like where this right here, the firmamento. I think this. That's what I think of it. It's like the sky, and then it's the vault of the sky.
I guess it's like you would say like vault would be like opening to something else. So it's kind of like maybe
Yes.
like that's like how
Yes.
they were picturing it before, as far as kind of like heavens, as far as something above them. It's like a vault
Yes.
to get to God.
Yes.
So maybe you can think of it as like a safe.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Separate. It's a separation from, I guess.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's I can't fully, but I think that kind of helped me understand.
And I think the next thing we're actually going to talk about was actually the. Or did you have anything else? My bad.
I think I'm good.
You're good at that? Okay. Remember we were talking about the two trees, right? And we're pretty much trying to figure out like what do they signify, right? And a lot of times when we're trying to figure that out, I was trying to say, okay, one is good, one is bad, whatever the case may be. But in reality, we're looking at is kind of like on the left side was like the Spirit of God, as far as those are all the things that pretty much that will give you, right? And a lot of that stuff is going to say pretty much it's most going to be like wisdom mostly. Yeah, there's a bunch of other things as far as faith, gentleness, meekness, God, and goodness. All those things are just things that come with wisdom, as far as like once you start having wisdom, a lot of times your life becomes a little bit easier, as far as because kind of like a little bit better is kind of like what your life's supposed to, I guess, kind of go towards. And on the right side is kind of like, we're talking about, we didn't really say the name, but we just said pretty much kind of like a serpent last week, which was kind of like those are all the things that come with whenever as far as you give yourself the authority to represent like what is good and evil and pretty much in your eyes. And so to kind of recap a little bit of last week, we're trying to figure out, which was what do these things actually symbolize for us? A lot of times we think about trees and what those things actually mean. And Daisy and I were talking about this on the way over here, and we said, okay, God put us over here as far as in Eden, and so we had pretty much Eden, and then we had the garden, and then God places us in the garden, right in the middle of it, and says kind of like this is going to be your home. You have all the fishes, you have all the plants, you have the animals to take care of and everything, right? And so they go and pretty much he tells and says like live your life right here. Like you have nothing else to do besides just live your life. Just chill here. Like you don't have to do too much at all. And so we go with pretty much the tree of as far as the Spirit of God, the tree of life, and how it says like you can eat of any tree except for just the one on the right side. And so and God what he's trying to do, and we were talking about this last time, is like God finally tells us, like he's trying to show us like, hey, have faith in me, trust in me, and I'll trust in you, and everything is going to be working out just fine. And when he says that, it's kind of like any kind of relationship that you have, like a friendship or you're dating or whatever the case may be, it's trust. And so a lot of times whenever you kind of tend to find a way, when somebody kind of steps over that bounds of trust, you start to kind of lose back, right? And that other person that's been kind of like betrayed in a way starts to kind of pull back a little bit, right? And we're kind of seeing that whenever God tries to figure out, like on this chapter, in chapter 3, what happens with that? Like, who is he actually trying to point the finger at? And who is he trying to pretty much still say, I'm going to cover you and everything else is going to be okay? Like, how does that represent that in chapter 3? And so what I want to take to that is pretty much, God, as far as like the tree of life that he has in there, he's trying to give us that trust, to that communion with him. And that's the closest thing we have so far as what we're reading in chapter 1 and 2. And we're going to see what humans think about that. And like we said before, I mean, when we start reading chapter 3, what does God say as far as in the beginning? Like, what are we supposed to do? Like, what are the commandments? Remember we talked about before. What are the things that? Yeah, go ahead. Give her a microphone. Sorry.
No, it's nothing about this. What's her name? Kathy came and we're gonna tell her.
Oh, go get her. Yeah.
Got to what?
She go get her.
Oh, okay.
Who?
Kathy.
Who's Kathy?
Karen's daughter. That's okay.
So I got a thing in my mind because I was talking with my dad, right?
Sure.
And then I brought up the question like if it was a spiritual place, and it had to do with the trees. So he was like, I think he said no. I don't know.
You said no to what?
To it being a spiritual place,
Mm.
and that the Spirit of God wasn't in there always, because you know how God visited them instead of being there all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, that's kind of like the symbolism, because.
Yeah. Well.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So last week, Abraham, the question was, is Eden a spiritual place? Is Eden even here on earth? And that was a question that they brought up, and that's why she's bringing it back up from last week,
So
just to catch you up.
To me,
like I was the one that said the little spiritual in quotation, but I didn't mean it literally after he explained. And like the reason why I see that I'm trying to like give it any
No,
other
you're good.
explanation. The reason why I see this is from my point of view. The reason why I see the way he's explaining it to you, like still referring to somewhere spiritual or whatever, is because it was just God visited that place, so it was the place of, I mean, if you think of Israel right now, where's the Holy Land, like if you ask somebody where's the Holy Land, is Israel, right? Is Israel perfect? Is Israel, it's still not perfect, but it's the Holy Land. So that's what I'm trying to highlight right there.
Yeah. I mean, and to kind of like, I guess for me, I guess what I'm trying to stay on that one still is that like, it's not so much as to say that like it was completely all spirit and everything else. I guess what I'm trying to depict on that one more than anything else is that was the first place that we actually had pretty much God in that presence, right? And every time we talk about the Garden of Eden, it's pretty much to say, the tree of life being God is there. And so it's kind of like when you think about the other times when you start to see, in the Bible, like what is the closest time we actually have to God? We talk about trees, right? And so you go to Moses, Mount Sinai. How many times did he take a trip up and down the mountain? And how many times were people fearful and didn't want to go up there with him at all because they saw that the presence was there. So it's kind of like, to me, the way I see the tree, it's kind of like the presence of God is like, yeah, it's more closer. So it's kind of like it's around, yes, but at the same time, like when you see Mount Sinai or even when you see the tabernacle, like how like sacred it is in that area, as far as like when you can go past certain levels, depending on pretty much how wise and everything else you were as far as within the membership. So it's kind of like, it's like those like three examples as far as I say like those areas are spiritual. That's kind of how I'm imagining it as far as just like the closest that you have, and each time it's kind of like it gets weaker and weaker in a way.
So like what I have, and I haven't really brought it up, but I had it as one of the points that eventually wanted to talk about is in the beginning, the first verses of the Bible. It says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth," and then it says, "And the earth was formless." Well, why is heaven like? The question, to me was like heaven and earth, right? And there's the Bible Project has a video on heaven and earth, and they say that that's where where earth meets heaven. It's not like God is, because remember that this place here, that the stuff that he created was for us. So it's not for him to dwell on. That's why he's visiting. This is the place where he will visit his people. So in a way, that's why. And I was trying to look for my example.
I think that actually makes sense because like the visit portion, it happens again in that same context.
And
right?
you see it, and if you look at it in the Bible, he visits in certain. He doesn't visit like just anywhere. Right. There's certain spots, and what I've been studying, it's called the hot spots. It's like that's where God dwells. And again, it goes back to tabernacle. Where does he dwell in the tabernacle? In the very, very back. Only certain people can go in there because it's very, very holy. So the same thing with the Garden of Eden is, and that's what I'm saying, like one of the comments that you made in one of the Bible studies was really, really well said, that like, because it was such a holy place and they made they did wrong doing, they chose wrong. So what do they have to do? God has to get them out of there because they're tainted now. So that's why, in a way, yes, it's spiritual because it's the closest where God can come and dwell with his people when he chooses. It's not like he's there, but that's sacred. There you go. Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. I guess
Does that make sense?
Okay.
That makes sense, everybody?
No,
No, it's good.
You're good.
No, but I mean,
I'm already right.
Yeah.
but it's just, especially because Abraham wasn't here last week. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it really is. It's a question that a lot of people sometimes don't understand, but it's stuff that comes to people's minds. So it's a good question.
Yeah. So that pretty much, I think that wraps up what chapter 2 was. Is what we talked about. Did you have anything else in chapter 2, or does anybody else have anything? So before we go on to chapter 3, no. You in the back? Okay, cool. All right. So I guess we'll go on and move to chapter 3. So it's pretty much the Eden, the fall. So
You have a question, Eric?
Go ahead, Eric.
No. Okay.
Go ahead. You got something.
Okay. My question would be, well, after the seventh day, everything was actually wait.
It's all good.
Never mind. I'm trying to. I'm like thinking
words.
I'm thinking as I'm
Saying.
asking it, but in chapter 2, like it goes back, right? You remember? Like,
Mhm. Mhm.
'cause-
Yeah, in more detail.
Yeah. I guess that kind of answered my questions because I was like,
Yeah, like y'all already answered one of these here too.
Oh, okay.
So
no,
last-
no.
I
But
didn't
like,
know what
okay,
questions you guys
because
had.
he said it's not good that the man is by himself,
Uh huh.
Right,
so then he makes woman,
Uh huh.
right.
but the days weren't complete yet, so
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. You're getting there. But the days. Wait.
Hmm?
Mhm.
Hmm? Are you saying to us or
I think he's trying. Like.
we're saying.
why does he say, or why did he not make man and woman at the same time? I guess.
He made him in this.
'Cause he-
Oh, I see his
like he's pretty much saying like why not make
Why
man
not make
and women at
the-
the same
yeah,
time?
Like make the two
I-
people at the same time. They don't know, man.
No.
That's a good question for next
Yeah.
week.
Okay.
So this is a good question. Anybody can research
Yeah,
it too for up for discussion for next week.
Oh, I have another question now that I scratched this one out.
You want to ask it now?
No.
No. Okay.
Okay.
We'll go through whenever it comes to it.
before,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so let's go back to pretty much to this side over here. And so let me move this.
Does anybody want to read? Because he read last
I don't mind
week,
reading.
and then I
so
read-
it's okay.
Okay, in English,
So it's up there just in case.
and we
so-
might stop you.
Yeah, we might stop in certain sections.
The mic is next to you, Eric.
Hello. Okay. Chapter 3, the fall. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals Yahweh Elohim had made. He said to the woman, "Did Elohim really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" The woman said to the serpent, "We may eat fruits from the trees in the garden, but Elohim said, this say you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die." "You will not certainly die," the serpent said to the woman. "For Elohim knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be open, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil."
Okay, I'm gonna stop you right there. Does anybody have anything? You have comments? Okay, she has comments. Okay. She turned it off.
God knows everything.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And does he know what's going to happen in the future?
So remember. Okay, you have something?
No, go ahead. I'll go after.
Remember one of those times when the pastor was teaching about God's. No. It was when he was talking about like how God knows everything, but he also knows. I guess if you want to give the example about like movies, but
Oh,
and
okay.
afterwards,
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
but he knows every choice you can make. So now go.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess like.
As an example,
Yeah,
kind of
as
modern
an
days.
example, right? So I mean, we'll go ahead and talk about other things. I mean, so who here has watched what is it, Loki from like the Marvel series? I'm pretty sure mostly all of you. So that's why I'm gonna use this example. I'm sorry, Vanessa. I'm sure you haven't. It's okay. So,
Spider-Man movies?
cause yeah. That's
No,
okay.
but you've
Most
seen
of
it.
them are, but yeah.
Okay, okay.
So like, I think a lot of us don't really comprehend like how God can move around, right? We just think kind of like He's with us, like as we get older, like He moves in the same timeline that we've moved, right? As far as like it's the same, like and that's what we always think. We don't think that like He can jump around. And so when you watch like Loki, there's a certain spot when they talk about the multiverse. There's like a random wave, looks like kind of like a Milky Way or something like that, and it pretty much on that spot, like you can pick and choose where to go in the timeline as far as in a universe. And so it's kind of like when you look at that one, it's kind of like you can pick and just jump into a certain spot and say, I'm here, or you can jump into a certain spot and go over there. And that sometimes makes more sense in people's heads to see like a visual of what that looks like. And so whenever we think about like, does God know everything? I mean, God doesn't move linear with us. He doesn't move like in time. He can move around whenever He wants to. He knows all. So it's kind of like you would think about maybe like our brains as far as like, can we retain all kind of memory as far as when we remember like when we were 2 years old? No, I mean we don't know any of that stuff. I mean, when we get to like 6 years old, maybe, you know what I mean. But before then, no. But God knows everything from the past, the future, and that's why He can. It's kind of like you think about like how He can jump around. Is the same way as far as that we think about like, oh, what does He know? He knows everything. Yes.
Okay. So now that that's said,
Okay.
I have a
She's
following
trying to set us
question.
up,
I
dude. You see it?
know.
I
She's
have
setting us up.
following question. So
Okay.
why did He create the serpent if He knew that it was gonna trick?
I have another question.
Eva.
Okay, that's fine.
Does anybody have the answer to that one?
I think I do. I think so.
Okay.
Okay, go for it.
Oh, he said he didn't. And James, he says he wouldn't put any temptation, right?
Yeah, God wouldn't tempt you.
Okay,
Uh-huh.
right? But man has free will. So they chose to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're gonna get there. We're also kind of jumping ahead a little bit too much right now.
This is my
Yeah.
question though.
Yeah.
What was your question again? Like I was trying to
Why
connect
did,
it.
why did He create? The
Why did He
serpent
create the serpent?
if He was gonna trick it?
Okay, if He knew that the serpent was evil. Okay, so my question is, I had another question, but like you kind of answered it already. But to connect it to hers is, since the place, okay, answer this question first. And I put, is sacred, is sacred considered perfect spiritually? Like Eden, for example.
Sure.
So Eden was sacred, right?
Right.
Okay.
So, I don't know if I said it wrong the
Yes,
first
no,
time.
no, no, I didn't hear you.
So, okay, so if Eden was sacred, does sacred mean that it's perfect in spirit? You know, when something is sacred, is like esto sagrado, like in espíritu, is perfect, es santo. You know,
Yeah.
does sacred mean perfect? And if yes, why was Satan or the serpent? Why was evil there in a sacred place?
Oh, but they said that it was always around.
You
Yes,
just
I said
answered your
last
question.
week. Yeah. That it's always been around.
You just answered your
Yeah,
question.
you answered your own question. So last week we talked about kind of like, because we were talking a lot about chapter 3 last week.
Pause.
Go
So,
for it.
sorry. So, then even in the sacred, evil could be present.
Well, look at how he was with it. Even Satan was in his
In heaven.
council. Yeah.
Yeah, because remember he was a fallen angel.
Yeah.
And at the time frame, it wasn't that like it wasn't really known that he was going to be there until we start to read it. And maybe things are going back and forth.
And
We're
we
kind of
see-
like,
yeah.
maybe in the beginning where you say, hey, we're all going to, like, all Elohim, we're all going to pretty much make man in our image. And in that round, in that table, because remember saying it's Elohim's talking to pretty much others. He's not talking to us because there's nobody here yet. So he's talking to others, and maybe he's talking to all these other angels as far as to kind of help that go. And so if he is, then maybe in that same time frame, you have one person in there kind of in the crowd kind of like, yeah, right, man, I'm going to ruin this for you. Just watch. And then later on, you know, something happens where it's kind of like one person or one, as far as the
Being-
angel, doesn't really like it. And that's what we're going to talk about in a minute. So does that answer your question so far? Go ahead.
I think you had one question.
Because
too,
we
no?
haven't even got to the point yet where they actually, oh, wait.
Okay.
Yes, we have.
Don't
never mind,
forget
go
it.
ahead.
What's it called? Lucifer. That's the name.
Whoa, we're already dropping names.
No, no.
Well, first, let's do this. Let's,
No, no.
let's do this. Give me a second. Give me a second. So,
Yeah.
let's go with Satan first, right? So Satan, what is the name? What is that? What is that meaning? We don't have any of the slides this time because
Yeah.
we're not really talking about it. But what does it mean?
Mm.
No.
Satanás significa?
What does it mean?
No.
Not yet. No. You're getting closer.
You know, you probably. No.
It went off my brain.
Yeah. Your brain's dead. So like, when you think of like kind of like you're going in a race and you have somebody that's always against you, what would you call that? An enemy? No, they're not an enemy. Rival? Okay. Huh? Yeah.
It's in.
But it's not that. Yeah. Okay, so it's a little bit further. So it's not like when you guys say pretty much like Satanas is like the devil. Huh? Yeah, it's like what was the word that we were using last time? It was yeah, you guys are jumping around. You gotta let me finish. Go ahead. Adversary.
Yes.
Okay, I was gonna say that the serpent was there because Satan was already created before Adam and Eve.
Right, that's what we already talked about. You guys have your own little
Oh.
conversation all the time. You gotta pay attention. Exactly. Pay attention over here.
Answers.
We already answered your questions. So okay. So Satan actually means adversary. So it's pretty much it's always against you for whatever reason. And so let's now talk about the verses real quick. So we see pretty much in verse 1 it says, now the serpent was more crafty, right? And so let's talk about pretty much those things, right? What does crafty mean, right? And if you actually look at it in a different word, so if you look at King James, they talk about shrewd. Right? Do any of us know what shrewd means? Okay, well, we're gonna get there. In Spanish, it's what is it? How do you say that, Daisy? Astuta. Exactly right. Okay. Clever. Exactly. Clever. Okay, but what does clever mean? Smart. Hold on. But we're gonna get there. Okay, so let's look at that. So clever or crafty, right? Crafty means let's go. Now it's gonna give us another word, clever. Okay, what does clever mean? So this clever. It says crafty. The definition is clever at achieving one's aim by indirect or deceitful method, right? And so it says clever. Okay, now what's clever mean? Quick to understand, to learn, to devise and apply ideas and intelligence. So it's already kind of saying, like no. What's pretty much trying to say is that like this person is so quick to kind of manipulate you into what they want you to do.
You guys know the term quick on your feet?
Yeah. So kind of like.
Yeah.
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 So quick on your feet, like easy to pretty much be like converted and everything else. That's what we're looking at on this one is pretty much, that's what it says. So now let's look at shrewd. So shrewd says having or showing sharp powers of judgment, astute. And that's the word that you guys have in Spanish, astute, right? And so astute is pretty much having or showing the ability to accurately assess situations or people to turn this into one's advantage. So if you see that somebody's about to do something for you, or if you want to try to like guide somebody in the wrong direction, that's what that word means. And so we look at Satan as far as like what the word's going to mean. It's an adversary, and this adversary, which really kind of defining that word now, what his title is. If he's an adversary, and he's also using like these kind of words as far as to find ways to guide you into the wrong area, like, that already shows you that when he shows up in the beginning of this chapter, you already know he's going to do something completely wrong without even knowing. Because obviously we know a bunch of other stuff's going on later on, but without even knowing about all the other things, like now we understand what this character is going to do. And if we go back, like we were trying to talk about in as far as chapter 2, what did he tell us to do? We didn't finish it because we started getting a bunch of questions. But what were the commandments that at the beginning that God told us to do?
From the tree.
No.
No, before that.
No, before that.
Roll.
Yes.
Oh, no, yeah.
Yes.
So we're
Rule.
supposed to rule.
Rule over the fish in the sea
Right.
and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves on the ground. And isn't it weird that this animal that's serpent on the ground is
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, how can we have, like, we're supposed to be saying that we're in charge of all these animals. We're in charge of everything that's in here. That God gave us that power to say, what makes us different compared to animals is that we have the divine power to rule over everything else. So why is it that this random thing comes over and we're just like, yeah, we're just going to follow you, man. Like, that's cool. Like, you're giving us this pretty much this stuff to try to think that that we need to be just like God, and you're trying to help us get there. Because that's what he's trying to do. So the serpent, right, when you look at him, it's not going to be the first time nor the last time that he's going to try to find ways to go against what God's trying to do a lot of times. And that's what his job's doing. That's his mission. His mission is to say, how can I find ways to make human exactly like God? That's his
fail.
whole thing. Huh?
or fail.
Yeah, or fail. But that's what he's trying to do. He wants to pretty much make either God lower to our level or us to come up to his level. That's all he's trying to do, to make us almost the same as God. And that's that's the issue that we see a lot of times. So does that make sense so far? Okay. Sorry, I got excited. I didn't know my voice was getting louder. I was like yelling the whole time.
Do you still have your question?
Well, I did. No. Yeah.
We do this.
Yeah. It's like your dad when he gets like louder after a while.
I know, he starts like, I can't hear you.
Yeah, I turn them down every once in a while. But okay, but does this now? Okay, we talked about the characteristics of God as far as Yahweh and what those characteristics are. Now we see the characteristics of Satan, the serpent. What?
So almost,
In a minute.
because I'm still within. Can you go back to the verses?
Yeah, sure.
So again, if now we know what he is, he's very quick on his things. Isn't it funny how he says, "Did Elohim really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" And the answer is,
Yeah. Yeah.
you. No, and they're like, no, he didn't say that. He said that we could eat from everything except for this and this.
Right.
He's like, Oh, why? Isn't that like
Yeah.
kind of weird that he's like he's
He's tricking the conversation.
yes.
Right.
Like when somebody's trying to get something from you.
Yes. Yeah.
She pulled a card on her. He pulled a card.
Mhm. And then if you look, again, it says, um, we may eat from the tree in the garden. We may eat from anything except for the tree that's in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die. And then he says, you will not certainly die, for Elohim knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be open, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. And then if we keep reading, that does this. This is true also. So he's using certain words that are true, and then
Right.
twisting them. Okay, now you can read. If we're good.
Okay. Sure.
Go ahead.
When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were open, and they realized they were naked, so they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves.
Okay. So again, if you go back to what the serpent said, he says, if you eat of it, your eyes will be open. And what happens? Their eyes were open, and they said, and then it said, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So why is it that they cover themselves? Because they define them within themselves what is good and what is bad. So they're like, oh, this isn't good, and they covered themselves.
Right. And so what was the last like verse that we were actually reading in chapter 2?
They were not
They were
ashamed.
not ashamed. And now, because they define good and evil for themselves, they're ashamed.
And another thing I wanted to point out was the word, and she took. Like, she took it. She took it upon herself to take. And that word gets used a lot, many times. Like, Jacob took the blessing. Like, they take it upon themselves
Right.
to do something that, yeah, they take it upon themselves.
I have a question. I've been waiting to ask this
Okay.
question. Okay, so let me see. The way I wrote it here doesn't make sense. But basically, let's say the serpent wasn't there.
Okay.
It was just Eve and the tree, and let's say the serpent never got there. Like, what made Eve like eat the? I mean, what caused the sin? Was it like if Eve? ¿Cómo te digo? Was it the serpent pushing it, and like Eve listened to the serpent, or like if the serpent wasn't there, like could Eve still eat it? Like would she still take
So
it?
your pretty much question is either does the blame rely on the serpent or does the blame rely on whenever Eve actually took the apple?
Yes. So like yeah, if the serpent wasn't there, like the serpent tempted her. So there goes temptation. She ate it. She disobeyed. But what if the serpent? So yeah, basically if it falls. Because the serpent was there, she ate it, or because it was her fault.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what your answer's gonna be on this one, but I mean, for me, what I think of it is that, like what Eric was saying in the beginning, like we all have our choices, and because they decided for their own choice to take part of it, even though like somebody can like push you, but if you find the way to say, okay, fine, I'll do it, no big deal, then it still relies on you. It doesn't rely like a lot of times on them. We can't always push and blame
Because
everybody on the outside.
if you keep reading, that's exactly what they do.
Exactly.
They put the blame.
Yeah. We'll get there.
Yeah.
We'll get there. We'll
But
get
the
there.
same, I have the same. It was the same answer. We were talking about how, why did God let them choose? Why did God?
Why give them the option to actually have an opinion or choice? Like why not just be like,
Just
God
this is
will
good.
make us as like robots and not have a conscience to decide for ourselves. Then would we say, is it really God's fault or is it our fault? Because then at the same time, God would create us like almost like robots, and we would have no option of choice. We'd just live around like, just
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
But I think he left us. What was it that we were talking about? That he left us the choice because he wants us to choose and trust him.
Right, because if you go back to, he made us as far as in his image to rule. He was supposed to rule everything above there, and we were supposed to rule everything down here. And we were supposed to pretty much be in a partnership with him to say, okay, we're both going in the same direction. We want to pretty much obey you by pretty much telling everybody about you, to worship you, to always be in your presence, and to show glory to you at all times. That's what we were supposed to do while we were here. And obviously, he gave us that choice to do that for us, but obviously, we got misled just a little bit. But that still falls
But
on
we
us.
still made the choice.
Yeah, it's still on humans. And that's what we'll read later on as far as when it comes to
You good?
blames.
Okay.
Sorry?
I'll come back.
Okay.
All right.
All right,
Next,
so let's go to the next
Danny.
one.
He's the reader.
Then the man and his wife heard the sound of Yahweh Elohim as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and they hid from Yahweh Elohim among the trees of the garden. But Yahweh Elohim called the man, "Where are you?"
Okay, so let's do something real quick before we kind of start, right? So we have a bunch of different words in here that can help us do something else. And remember in the beginning, we were always trying to find things that connect us on every chapter, or even just the movements going back and forth, right? So we have different sections, right, when we actually look at it, and it says like, and it says pretty much like the sound of Yahweh Elohim. What did we talk about last time with Ruach? What does that do? What is that?
It's a spirit.
The
Is the spirit?
Okay, but what else did we say about it? It's like a breeze. You see it like in the trees, and so you hear when you see heard the sound of Yahweh Elohim. Yeah, it's pretty
How do
much.
you hear the sound?
Yeah, how do you hear it? Yeah, you hear wind. You see the trees moving, right? That's what we're saying. So it's like you pretty much. How do you know God's around when you start seeing those little things? As far as that's kind of like we talked about last time, Ruach, and that's what was our main topic of this whole thing was Ruach a lot of times. So then we have that portion first, which is like heard of the sound, and then we have later on in the garden in the cool of the day.
So
does that
in
mean?
Spanish, yeah.
Afternoon. Yeah.
So, yes.
Yeah.
And so if I read it in Spanish, it might make sense. What verse is it?
That's verse 8.
Y oyeron la voz de Jehová Dios que se pasaba en el huerto, el aire del día. So what is the cool of the day? The wind. So on here, the translation is a little bit, they took it as more of like, what did I tell you? Like a temperature? Like, yeah.
The weather.
But if
Yeah.
you think about it, and oh, never mind, you're not there yet. Yeah. Y oyeron la voz de Jehová Dios que se paseaba en el huerto, al aire del día. Y el hombre y su mujer se escondieron de la presencia de Jehová Dios entre los árboles del huerto. So why would somebody hide?
Yeah, that's the next thing.
I don't know if you had it there.
Huh?
No. Well, yeah.
That's portion of it, but
Yeah, but why would, but they're talking about the sound. Why would
So,
they
like,
hide?
like they heard the sound and right away they hid. Why are they hiding?
Yeah, yeah.
Microphone.
They knew they were wrong, and then, mm-hmm.
Fear. They knew they were wrong.
But they knew it was God, or why?
So basically,
Well,
like,
they knew it was wrong because their eyes are open now.
if there's a
their
hurricane
opinion.
here and we are afraid, it's because of the sound, right? Like the
Right.
sound of it is so scary. So this, I know it paints like a picture of like, oh, it's the cool of the day. It's like,
yeah, like pretty chill.
pretty-
but
but
it's not.
it's not, because it's
Yes. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah,
so it's
it's very
a
turbulent.
small little,
Yeah.
if you want to call it a small little storm in Eden right now, and so
Yeah.
they're scared. Like something's going on that's not normal in
Yeah.
they saw in their day to day. So this to me is like another form of God's presence. Like if you want to know about God, like this is when He's angry. He's yeah. It's very scary. It's very
Yeah.
scary.
So I mean, just think about it kind of like you watch a movie, and then like you see nothing but like the clouds get super dark, and out of nowhere like all this like whooshing is pretty much happening in just only one spot, and you look up and you're just like something bad's about to happen like
Somebody
right on
watches
top
too
of
much
me.
movies.
Huh?
Somebody
I
watches too
love
much movies.
Dude. Sorry, it's okay. I'm not gonna talk about that right now. Okay, so they're pretty much like, and so we're talking about like right here, like they hid from Elohim, right? As far as Yahweh Elohim, is there any other stories that you guys can think about that this happened, the exact same thing happened? And I kind of talked about it earlier. Remember, we're talking about the presence of God, spiritual, and everything else.
Where?
Yeah, Jonah.
No, I was talking.
Like where else can you feel? Can
Like
you
the-
read the same concept like that?
Like
There's
they
a
said earlier with like a sound and kind of like kind of confusing people and making them scared and everything else.
Of, like,
where
the
else have we saw
sur-
that in the Bible? Even like way
In the storm?
closer, way closer, way closer.
oh, over there in the back. That's
crucified,
too.
that's-
Yeah.
yeah.
Before Jonah.
Yeah, like pretty much still in the beginning books.
Okay, just skip.
Okay, all right. Mount Sinai, right? He comes down with Moses, and then all the people.
But you said it was closer.
Yeah, it's closer. No.
The Jonah.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, it's closer. Yeah.
But you
But what, okay,
when
but
you
what
read
happens?
it, yeah, when you read it, you see.
Yeah,
you,
because
you'll
okay,
read
so
it.
everybody freaks out. They're all freaking out. They're just like, "What are we like? What's going on?"
When they like, why are you the only one talking to God? And then
And-
go show them and they get scared.
Yeah, and mhm.
Yeah,
mhm.
because I think like when I think about that story, I always think kind of like, I mean, you guys are too young for Charlie Brown, right? You ever watch Charlie Brown? Okay, huh? Yeah, like you're to, like the part where they go to school, and like on the speaker when you hear like the adults talk, what happens? It's like wow, 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 right? I think a lot of times when I think of Mount Sinai, I always think of like everybody around there had no idea what God was saying. Only Moses, because that's how kind of close Moses was, like the closest to God at that time frame, and everybody else was kind of like scattered around. So when I think about like when they heard something really crazy, I always think about like they have no idea what's going on, just like loud noises. But Moses kind of like, I know what's going on. Why are these people freaking out? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just scary. It's just
That's how
scary.
I'll just
Like
side
imagine
note,
the
sorry.
storm's coming and then you have to walk to it. Would you walk to it? We usually run away from it. No.
Microphone.
Right now, it's
Microphone. Microphone.
In Moses, in Moses' point of view, he probably just saw like peaceful, nothing, no storm, no nothing, just voice of God.
Trust. It's trust. Yeah. So in here, they're fearful, and that's what we were wanting to point out. Just the presence of God. What is presence of God? We saw it in the beginning of Genesis 1, where He's breathing air and He's bringing creation, but then He gets mad and He's angry, or yeah, and then you get this types of characteristics or types of.
Matthew.
Go ahead.
Matthew. Turn down.
Next.
Okay.
Your
All right.
question?
Let's go to the next one.
I was gonna because you know how they fear God right now, and when people go in the presence of God, even when He's not mad, they still shake and everything
Mhm.
because
Yeah, that's what we
they
saw in
feel
Daniel.
unworthy
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
I just want to put that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when we saw Daniel, what happened with him? I mean, like, how long did it take him to pretty much meditate for like those 2 weeks to understand how to even get away from all that stuff? And it took him straight to the ground, and it was really hard for him to even take it. You know what I mean? So it's for sure.
'Kay.
Everybody has one thing. All right, let's keep going to the next one.
Daniel.
He answered, I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. And he said, who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from? The man said, the woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree, and I ate it. Then Yahweh Elohim said to the woman, what is this that you have done? The woman said, the serpent deceived me, and I ate it.
Question. You might have the same one because we raised our hands at the same time. But if God knows everything,
Here we go again.
if God knows everything, here's the thing. He's asking that question. Is he being serious or he's like, oh,
Okay,
who
let's-
told you?
Let's take it this way, right? So like when say for like your parent, right, already knows that you messed up. Like you took a controller, you took something that you weren't supposed to. Like you took the Xbox even though you were grounded. If somebody did something, like you took the keys for your car and you're not supposed to, right? They already know. Yeah, they want. Yeah,
Confess.
like your
Like
parent.
confess. Yeah.
Yeah, your parent always wants to understand what your reasoning behind things.
God, do you not know what happened?
Why is he questioning if he already knows? Yeah. But now,
Microphones.
yeah.
But that's kind of like what the reason why I go towards like the pretty much the parent example is because, I mean, who is he to us? What do we always call him in other words? Our Father. So I mean, whenever a lot of times he's trying to figure out, it's the same thing what our parents trying to do as well to us. Exactly right. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit more, right? So remember earlier, right? We talked about like the heard of the sound, right? Because he said pretty much, I heard you in the garden, right? How did he hear him? The sound, right? That's what we talked about earlier, and that's what we're trying to get to. And so why they hid, right? They talked about right here again. Why? Do you guys remember? So why did they hide? Because right here that says it says, I heard you in the garden and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. Huh? What? What are you guys saying? What's a lie?
Saying was oh my gosh. They're saying was it
I was afraid because I was naked.
yeah, so are they lying of like, oh, I'm hiding because I'm naked, or like, or I'm hiding because you're here and I'm scared of you?
It's both. So it's pretty much both. Is one is that their eyes are open. They knew that they did wrong. So every time you do something wrong, what do you do? If you do something wrong from your parents, do you try to tell them right away, I did something wrong? A lot of times you're just like, I hope they just don't find out. That's what you pretty much what people always go towards a lot of times. And so, and that's what Adam is doing a lot of times. It's pretty much he's like, man, or even so he's pretty much saying like, I'm just gonna hide. Hopefully there's not gonna find out what happened. Maybe that's not why he's showing up. It's just a coincidence that he's showing up at this time frame. And so we're seeing right here that, but the reason why he was doing it is because he said he was naked and he was afraid. And that goes back to the whole shame thing again, right? And so it's kind of like he knows he's doing something wrong, but he thinks it's wrong in his eyes because he's naked, because his eyes are open. And we're just repeating it again and again to show why that's happening. Okay, and so, I told before, the information as far as the reasoning, as far as like, to ask you, so just like a kid does, as far as just like your parent does to you, to your kids.
The only other thing I have is, again, just Genesis 1 through 11 have a lot of foundation to how the biblical authors use or write their own sections. So again, with the voice of the Lord, you'll see that pattern again, like we talked about Mount Sinai. Usually when you hear the sound of the voice of the sound of the Lord shows up in any scripture, it means that people have failed a test most of the time. So the sound makes you think it can destroy you. It can decreate you. So just like how his voice created, just by him speaking, he created. By him speaking too, sometimes he can decreate you. And I have this one verse that I wanted to read.
Does that make sense to you guys? Decreation? Like if creation is bringing it up, decreation does what? The opposite. It's like death, right? Okay, just making sure you guys understand that.
I'm just going to read this one passage. It's in Sophonias, and it says, I will sweep away everything from the face of the earth, declares the Lord. I will sweep away both man and beast. I will sweep away the birds in the sky. And so you see the repetitiveness again, the birds in the sky and the fish in the sea, and the idols that causes the wicked to stumble. When I destroy all mankind on the face of the earth, declares the Lord. So it's just repetitive. Anything that you see in the beginning of these first chapters, you'll re-see it again, or it's them saying it again later on. So I just wanted to point that out.
And I guess this is probably the last thing we're going to finish off with, because we're kind of getting close. But the last thing we're going to talk about, right, is and so he pretty much, right, God is pretty much asking him right here, have you eaten from the tree that I have commanded you not to eat from, right? And what did we talk about earlier with as far as choice and everything else? And the man said, the woman, right? The woman that you have put here with me. Huh? No, he's not blaming God. He's blaming the woman. He's saying, the woman that you put here with me, she gave me the fruits.
The man blamed the woman.
But then he's saying, why?
Microphone.
Who?
So he's like, you put her here, and then she made me make this mistake.
Yeah.
So
That's, the same thing. Like, just like kind of like a.
It's what we were going back to the same question. Is like, he's asking him, did you eat it? And the answer should have been yes. But instead of just confessing, he's pointing it.
All these extra details he's trying to give. That's just trying to say, it's not my fault, really. I'm only pretty much half involved. It's somebody else's fault instead, too. And that's what we always do as far as humans. We always try to shift the blame and not try to take the full 100% on ourselves.
You sure? Oh, you're just going to say that?
Yeah, it was an example. But
go ahead.
Yeah.
No?
Okay.
Okay.
You sure? Okay. And so we're trying to remember I told you about in chapter 2, right? And we said, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. Copy and paste Adam to Eve, pretty much, right? And why did he do that? And what I talked about last time in chapter 2. Why did he pretty much make exact same replica of Adam, but into a female version to say, this is for as far as your partner, for you here. Why did he use the same rib? You remember what we talked about last time? Microphone.
It was for the guy to know, like, this was made exactly like you.
Exactly right. Yeah, so like when you Exactly. So it's pretty much like it came from you. Like, so you can't say, like, to your point you're saying earlier, you can't blame me. I made something exactly like you. It's you. You're the same person in this, but just in a different form. So you
Just-
go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish.
So you can't like say that like, hey, like this is the woman's fault because she's just like me, and that's what even Adam said that too. That was his quotes. That she is now bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. She is now pretty much in my unity as far as together.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
And it's just a side note for all of you guys, and even for me and Christian as married, like I can't blame Chris because of if something's going wrong. I can't blame him and be like, it's your fault. Like, no, that it's a mutual. Like something happened mutually, and we need to fix it because we both did it. You know,
Right.
we both did. Yeah.
And
So just for the future too, it's like whenever you guys future get married, just remember that like it's never one person's fault. Like it's always going to be, because going back to Genesis, you guys are equals.
right. And that's what it goes back to, like when he says when two, like one becomes two, but two becomes one, right? As far as the union as far as a couple,
Yeah, say
Right.
slow.
it's kind of that's kind of like, so if you have one person, it's not really a household, right? But if you have two people and they went into a house, now it's a household because two becomes a household, right? So now it's just pretty much one house is two people. You can call it that way.
I saw it. Hold on.
Microphone.
I'm trying to explain this to Daisy. I saw it as when he said one became two. I saw it as how Adam was one, and then out of Adam there was two. Like there was Eve, and then there was two. It's 'cause
Oh, yeah. Okay.
you said one becomes two and two becomes one. So I was
Yeah.
trying to explain the one becomes
Yes.
two.
Okay. Okay. I see. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
are you lost?
Yeah, I was
Oh,
like,
okay.
hold on.
I
I
didn't
was
see her
being
face.
I was,
didn't-
I was
we
being.
talked about it before. Yeah, I had no idea. I never looked this way.
You know her look.
Yeah. So, huh? The
Okay.
same look as Eric, female version though. Yeah.
See?
So, and so
Yeah.
and that's what we're kind of trying to leave it off at, right? Is that like, it's not so much as to always say that like Daisy was saying, like it's a union with your partner all the time, and you can't always try to shift the blame. If you want to say, yeah, we both took fault for it, you gotta remember too. God told Adam in the very beginning, this is the one thing I'm gonna tell you: don't eat from that tree. Did Adam tell Eve that, or not? He's pretty much in charge of that time frame. He's in charge of everything in that time frame. So he's responsible for it. Kind of like if your kid does something wrong, are you responsible for your kid's actions? Yes, because you're not teaching the kid the right way you're supposed to.
As the head of the house.
Huh? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah.
But if she knew it, because like we saw it last time when she talked to the serpent, right? She told the serpent, hey, yeah, it's wrong. I'm not supposed to do it. So it's still his fault regardless. And so like we finish off right here, right? It says, so then Yahweh Elohim said to the woman, like pretty much now he's talking, because he talked to the man, and the man said, it's the woman's fault. Okay, well, I'm going to talk to the woman now, see what she says. And so he said, what is this that you have done? And the woman said, it wasn't me, the serpent. Like, he deceived me, and I ate it because he told me to. But like what Daisy's saying earlier, like, are we not in charge of animals? Are we not in charge of those things? Why are we accepting? So it's kind of like, yeah.
So are we becoming lower than yeah.
Exactly. And so that's kind of, go ahead.
Earlier, I got this. It's like.
What?
Oh.
It's like it got a thought in my head
Okay.
Okay.
connecting to that.
Okay.
So
Let's hear the thought.
you know the king Xerxes with Esther.
Oh yes.
Yeah, and then his best friend told him to kill every Judas,
Mhm.
right? Right?
I think so.
And
She's like, yes.
and then Esther is Jewish,
Uh huh.
Yeah.
and then the point is, he was a king, and then I guess he knew Esther was Jewish. Or she
You
didn't.
keep getting quiet. I can't
No,
hear
he
you.
didn't know. He didn't know.
Okay.
I don't think he
Okay,
knew.
okay.
Be
But
confident.
anyway,
Be confident.
He trusted in somebody lower than him, and then he got manipulated. I
Oh,
guess.
because you're saying because he trusted somebody that was less than him or
Mhm.
whatever the case may be, as far as not in the same equal as him, he got deceived
Mhm.
and he got punished, or not really punished,
No,
but got
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, so you're saying it's pretty much like with you're saying that same parallel with humans and animals, because we went lower and try to listen to pretty much them, then we got deceived. Because instead of us just being standing our ground
Mhm.
and saying this is our choice, we got deceived because we listened to somebody lower than us. Yeah, I mean that's a good parallel for sure.
Mhm.
Microphone. You got it, dude. Don't worry.
It's like if we listen to somebody that's like not Christian, and
Yeah, like yeah, a child or somebody that's not in faith, and they start to
Yes.
question your faith, and you start to think, well, maybe I'm not in the right area because they're asking too many questions that you can't answer, right? So yeah, I mean that's a good one for sure. So I mean, I guess we'll leave it at this. Unless Daisy, you have anything or anybody else has any questions, it's just kind of like, what does this make of us? Because where does the blame lie on us all the time? Do we always want to shift the blame on other people all the time? Or when are we ever going to take responsibility for it? And we're going to see a little bit later on as far as because we don't ever really take the blame for things and because we never really just have like a hard, like mental, like toughness of ourselves, we end up always having consequences where we're going to see later on.
Yeah. So like, for example, like today Vanessa told us, hey, no, she said, did you guys watch that one video? And I was like, oh, I felt so bad. I was like, no, like I was like, no, I didn't watch it at all. And if I had been like, yeah, I watched it, she would have realized that I didn't like listen to it or watched it. But think about it in your daily lives too, and start applying and trying to I'm not saying confess, but like we'll confess.
Sure, I mean, that's what you're supposed to do anyways, but yeah.
Own up to your mistakes and be like, okay, but not just own up to it, but be able to like turn it around and be able to make it something
and I
good.
think we need to understand what those mistakes are so we don't do them again. And that's it. I think that's the main thing is because if we keep repeating it again, even though we're confessing to God every single time, hey, I'm sorry, I messed up. Can you help me? Like, what are we doing? Yeah, I mean, you're not taking it serious either whenever you do that. I mean, because we're just saying, oh, I just, do this and that should be just fine. But we still have to find a way for ourselves to stop. But what is the other word we can use? Is wisdom. We need that wisdom to tell ourselves what we really should be doing. So.
Yeah, because if
Exactly
I was
right.
just thinking about it, if I had been like, yeah, I watched it, I'm trying to upwind Vanessa by saying, yeah, I did do it. Estoy tratando de ser astuta. Estoy tratando de ser astuta, Vanessa. But in reality, I should be like, no, I did it. Like,
Yeah.
So.
Can't be clever all the time.
Exactly.
Okay, so I guess that's it.
Wow, we
So-
didn't finish the whole chapter.
Yeah, we didn't finish chapter yet. It's already 9, so.
Yeah.
That was really nice.